Meanwhile, former Vice President Pence says he plans to fight a subpoena from the special counsel investigating former President Donald Trump's actions surrounding the January 6th Capitol attack, calling the demand for his cooperation unprecedented and unconstitutional. Pence addressed reporters after speaking at an event in Minnesota yesterday, maintaining he is immune from testifying because of legal protections for lawmakers. He says he was acting as president of the Senate during the January 6 Electoral College vote count rather than as a member of the executive branch and therefore has legislative immunity.
My fight is on the separation of powers. My fight against the DOJ's subpoena, very simply, is on defending the prerogatives that I had as president of the Senate to preside over the joint session of Congress on January 6th. For me, this is a moment where you have to decide where you stand. And I stand on the Constitution of the United States.
Pence also noted his argument for legislative immunity was the same one the Justice Department used in 2021 in its defense of a lawsuit claiming the 2020 election was illegitimate. The Justice Department succeeded in getting that lawsuit dismissed, but the judge did not cite the government's position on legislative immunity in tossing out that case. Pence was subpoenaed by special counsel Jack Smith, the source familiar with the matter said last week. So, John Meacham, obviously this is a man in Mike Pence who's planning to run for president. He was in Minnesota and Iowa yesterday. One of the attack lines, not just for Pence, but for every Republican running right now, is the weaponization of the Justice Department, the weaponization of the FBI, all these things we've heard from Donald Trump and his acolytes. But is he on good ground here with his argument saying, I will take this to the Supreme Court if I have to?
Yeah. As a profile in courage, Vice President Pence is snatching defeat from the jaws of victory here. This is I'll tell you what's unprecedented and unconstitutional is what the President of the United States was trying to force the Vice President of the United States, who's the President of the Senate, to do. And Mike Pence stood between us and the abyss. And it is a remarkable thing because if he had caved to what the president wanted to do, we would have had chaos. It could have pushed past deadlines. It could have gone to the House, any number of things. And so he did an important and good thing. And so this just feels to me, as you're saying, like a little bit of stagecraft for the base. The constitutional argument doesn't strike me as particularly compelling because he is an executive branch officer. And so if I were him, just tell the truth. You know, when in doubt, the truth sometimes works.
Mm-hmm. It's the same dilemma. Go ahead, Joe.
No, I was just going to say they just can't, Jonathan Lemire. They just can't ever play it straight. I mean, here's a guy who again did some things very right on January the 6th, and now he's claiming privilege that he can't tell the truth about an insurrection that led him and Secret Service around him thinking that they may be killed on that day. Secret Service protecting him, holed up while the mob was outside the room, just feet away, calling home like it was 9/11 because they didn't expect to survive the day. And Mike Pence says that he was fleeing down there in his position as president of the Senate. It's a preposterous argument and an argument that the Supreme Court will throw out. But, you know, Jonathan, this is just like politicians that stood up and were strong on January the 6th who are now saying, yeah, I'll vote for Donald Trump if he's a Republican nominee. I've said before that he disgraced America and that he was a danger to the Republic. But, yeah, I'll vote for him if he's a Republican nominee. It's just, you're just like, at some point, you're going to have to choose a side. And you're going to have to either support American democracy or support a guy who has said that the Constitution needs to be overturned. What was the exact word he said? The Constitution needs to be, what did he say on Truth Social?
Suspended.
Suspended.
Oh, my God.
Terminated. I think it was terminated. Maybe even terminated. Now, let me just ask you, if you're Mike Pence or your other members of the Republican Party, or if you're just somebody out there watching right now that says, well, I don't like Donald Trump, but I sure don't like that Joe Biden guy. He's crazy. Yeah, I'd vote for Donald Trump. How do you ever vote for a man who tried to overturn American democracy and who said that he wanted to, quote, terminate the Constitution of the United States? Just like I said before, this is not really that hard. And these people are just sullying their reputations for life for not standing up for what is obvious: the defense of the Constitution, the defense of American democracy, the defense, well, of all the things that they claimed to be supporting when they held up their hand and took an oath to the Constitution of the United States.
Yeah, as the saying goes, it's a time for choosing, but they won't. They're not going to choose. It was Mitch McConnell just this week. Again, we know he's been a fierce critic of Donald Trump since the insurrection. But he made clear this week that if Trump were to be the Republican nominee, he would support him again. The situation with Pence, very reminiscent of what we were talking about just a few minutes ago about Nikki Haley, where trying to distance himself from Trump somewhat, but not alienate or anger Trump or his supporters. Won't go all the way there. And Mika, we should know this is the second time that Pence has tried to be very cute when it comes to investigations. Where
let me make it clear, it's not cute.
No, the January 6th investigation as well. He would not cooperate. He didn't want to testify, but he sent his aides to do so. And that's happening here too, where he doesn't want to have to use his own words, his own voice to condemn what Trump did.
His own reality, his own experience,
that's right.
his own truth.
Stood up to him that day, but not since.